This is where passion meets positivity and optimism. In a world where bad news abounds, You Are Solid Gold with Michele Lau celebrates the good in our lives and the beauty in the hidden gems around us. Welcome to You Are Solid Gold. Here she is, international television host and QVC jewelry expert, Michele Lau.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to You Are Solid Gold with Michele Lau. It's so nice to be here today. You know, I feel like it's old home week here. Just happened to reach out to a friend of mine, and as I was talking to him, it was his birthday recently. I thought to myself, why isn't this guy on my show? He's one of my oldest friends. He's one of the people that are closest to my heart. And so I want to introduce you guys to Killer Ken Resnick. Hi, Ken. How you doing?
Hi, Michele. Yeah, it's like we only go back. This is going to be embarrassing. We're dating each other 35 years.
Isn't that crazy? And we did not date each other. Although, you know,
when I said dating, I meant age-wise. Age-wise.
I know what you know. But by the end of this interview, you guys, you are going to learn some things about Ken that I can guarantee you he has never said anywhere else in an interview, mostly because the people interviewing you probably didn't know to ask the questions. I do. We grew up together. I'm going to let you tell the story of how we met.
Well, we met at that Breakfast of Champions, and were you with Skyway News, or was it? Yeah, because they had kind of reached out to me. That was when I was doing AWA wrestling, and reached out if I would come and be one of the celebrities, at this breakfast, and I was glad to. And it was really kind of one of those things. We met and like we were just friends
right
immediately.
Away. It's funny, isn't it? How you meet people and then they're with you for your life.
I
you know?
answered, it was you, and you said, "Hey, it's Michele. I've got somebody here that wants to talk to you." And you handed me the phone, and kind of long story, I didn't recognize him at first. It was the Macho Man, Randy Savage.
No, Ken had introduced us a long time ago, and I was living down in Florida at the time, right? And I just happened to run into Randy at, wait for it, Boston Market. So we said, let's have lunch. So he and I sat down, and it's the longest conversation I'd ever had with Randy. And we were laughing about how funny it would be if Ken were there at the same time. So we called him at the table. And do you remember that you thought it was an impersonator at first?
Yeah, I did.
Hilarious.
I mean, everybody used to do the, "Oh yeah," or the snap into a Slim Jim. And you had, and what precipitated it, evidently you had mentioned, the eye surgery I had just undergone. Right. And at first, I didn't believe him. And then he mentioned something that, only he would know. Right. And I realized, it was the Macho Man. He was kind of out of the business, and, had reunited with his high school sweetheart and was really in a good place. And I mean, it was amazing. He was genuinely concerned. Yeah, that's one of the all-time classics.
It was a great
I've never
story.
asked, who bought lunch?
Oh, I'm sure he did. I mean, he was a really generous, really nice guy. I'm sure he did. I mean, he's a gentleman, right? But you and I, we have a habit of surprising one another throughout our lives, and we do. We have a really special relationship. One of the best birthdays I ever had was because of you, Mr. Resnick. Here's what happened. All of a sudden, I get a phone call from Ken. It was my birthday. I was in between boyfriends. I was feeling kind of down. And he called me and he said, "Hey, what are you doing for your birthday?" And I said, "Nothing. I'm staying home with the cat, And he said, "No, you're not." He said, "Get dressed and I'm going to come and pick you up at," it was like 5:30. I said, "Okay, It's early, but great, fine." So knock, 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 5:30 came. I opened the door, and guess who's you'll never guess who's standing there. Herschel frickin' Walker. Ken, I almost went out of my mind. I didn't, excuse my language, but Ken knew how crazy I was about Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker at the time was just at the top of his game. He's an incredible guy. I'm all about good people doing good things. And Herschel's really been about that too, his entire career. So yes. I couldn't believe it. I just stood there like that. And
that was the one time I saw you speechless.
Oh my God. He put his arm out and I put my arm in his arm and they walk us out to this beautiful limousine and opened the door, and his wife's in the back, who I'd never met Herschel Walker either, but I got to meet his lovely wife. And Ken's in there and he's just beaming. And then, okay, you can pick it up from here. The limo takes us to a restaurant.
Mancini's. No, Mangini's.
Mangini's.
No, Mangini's.
I love both of those restaurants.
I had gotten to be friends with Herschel Walker through Franklin Sports. And I had gotten to know him through appearances and events at Franklin. And then he suddenly was traded to the Minnesota Vikings. And this was really right after the trade. Well, when he got to town, he really didn't know anyone. And I knew it was your birthday, and I thought, she's never going to believe this one.
It's still one of my best memories ever. You guys, when we walked into that restaurant, this is why we went so early. Remember, I was telling you, I thought, well, that's awful early, but okay. They closed. Yeah, we were the only people in the whole dining room. It was, I felt like a movie star. I felt so special, Ken, and it's because of you. So I guess one of the big reasons I wanted to talk to you today is I want to shine light on that. I want to shine light on what a kind and what a sweet and what a wonderful person you have always been, not only to my life, but to so many people. I think when people hear stories or see, wrestlers in particular, they're rough and they're gruff and they're, tough and they're always talking smack about one another. And, you're in the ring and you're killer Ken Resnick and all this stuff is going on. And they don't realize that the Herschel Walkers, that the Ken Resnicks, that these people in the world are some of the most giving people. And I think some of the most grateful people for what they have and what they've been given in their life. And so I honor that. I honor that today. And I'm just so excited to, again, talk a little smack with you because we know all kinds of great stories.
When it's supposed to be good people doing good things, I'm very glad you relaxed the rules for me.
Right. That's funny. So yeah, I even met you at a breakfast that was to benefit other people. And, I also met Perry Williams that day. Perry, again, a sportscaster in Chicago right now. And the three of us have still remained friends to this day. So when you know good people, you know good people.
One of the best things about that Leukemia Society breakfast, Tim Laudner was there. He was the catcher for the Twins.
Yeah.
And Tim was a wrestling fan, so he and I obviously hit it off. And I went to Vern Gagne, who was there. And for the next breakfast, we auctioned off 4 front row ringside. And the winner could do a meet and greet with his choice of wrestlers. Tim, was able to get the Twins involved and literally auctioned off batting practice and baseball practice with Tim Laudner, catcher for the Twins at the Metrodome. Brad Maxwell, my friend from the North Stars, auctioned off a hockey practice for 1 child and 3 friends at the Met Center. And doing all that, and then Becky Plowman-Hahn from Wilson, who was a tennis pro and had a tennis show, got Wilson to contribute and tennis lessons from her on her show. And we took it from a few hundred. By the next breakfast, I think we raised over 5,000, and that continued
for years.
For years, in fact, and
I love the picture of you and Hulk Hogan. I think that's one of my favorite photos. Another incredible guy.
That was my very first full day at WWF, and that was my first day. And we were doing in the middle of an interview for one of the markets, and the photographer, a gentleman named Steve Taylor, wanted to get a shot of me that they were going to put in the WWF magazine. And he just happened to get that moment where I've got a big grin and Hulk's got a big smile, and that's kind of become the iconic photo.
Weren't you on something called Piper's Pit? I remember, what was the guy's, he always wore kilt. What was his name?
Rowdy
Piper.
And I mean, it's one of the iconic segments to this day in all of wrestling. And it was, everything we did was, totally unscripted. And all of a sudden, the pre-production meeting, they had a change, and they were going to do something that was going to occur on the pit. So Vince McMahon says to me, "Oh, you're going to be the guest tonight on Piper's Pit." And it's one of the iconics. So when people always ask, "What are some of your greatest moments in wrestling?" I get to say, "Well, I was a guest on Piper's Pit."
It's so funny, but I'm laughing to myself because I'm thinking of a story. I hope you don't mind me bringing this stuff up. One of the stories I love, and I tell this story every now and again when I've had a few glasses of wine, is when you got invited to see Vince and you lost a part of yourself, if you know what I'm saying.
In 1986, I left the AWA, had no plans. I had never been in contact with Vince McMahon or anyone at WWF. Obviously, I knew talent that was there that had left AWA. Hulk and Bobby Heenan and Blackjack Lanza, who I think you met.
I remember him. I loved Blackjack.
One of the breakfasts. See, I became such good friends with you. It turned out I put the arm on a lot of people to come to those breakfasts.
You did. And people always laugh when I tell them that I know some of these guys and that I really like them. And, they're like, "You wrestling? Oh my God, I loved it. I became obsessed with it."
The first year I brought Stan Lane from the Fabulous Ones, who I just reunited with last September in New York. We did a virtual autograph session benefiting St. Jude's Children's Hospital. But I had left, and it was like 2 days after the final show I did with AWA, which was Wrestle Rock, and the infamous Wrestle Rock Rumble rap video that I'm in is still out there and resurfaces every now and again, much to my chagrin. But Jack Lanza called, and he wanted to know, what happened at the show and what kind of crowd, and things, no inner secrets. And he said, "Anything else?" I said, "Well, I'm done," and he started laughing. I said, "No, I'm done. I'm not going back." And he didn't believe me. And he said, "What are you going to do?" And I kind of told him I was thinking of going back to Chrysler. I was going to meet with them next week. And he said, "Don't do anything. I'll be in town in a couple of days, and I'll call you. We'll get together." And he called me up one night, and I think 2 days later, he said, "Hey, what are you doing for breakfast?" And he said, "Okay, I'll pick you up at 5:30 and wear a coat and tie." And I said, "What are you, nuts?" He said, "I'm not getting up at 5:30 in a coat and tie to breakfast." He said, "I'll pick you up at 5:30. He said, "Because we're on the 6:50 flight to LaGuardia. Vince wants to see you."
Vince McMahon is the man. This is the guy.
WWF.
Right. Okay. Continue.
And I called, and Northwest verified that there was a prepaid ticket in my name to LaGuardia. So Jack picked me up. Vince in a limo picked us up, and I got there and kind of went through a series of mini interviews with staff, and finally got called into Vince's office. Literally within the first 5 minutes, he says to me, "Tell me about your mustache."
Okay, now I got to interrupt here. I got to interrupt here because I've heard this story before. Okay, so Ken's mustache had a life of its own back then. It was big. I wondered what that lip looked like. Okay, so it was a part of your branding. It was something that you were really known for, and it was at the time. It was very, it was very virile. It was very masculine. This was the thing, is to have these big mustaches, right? So imagine this. There he is in Vince McMahon's office, and I remember you describing his office to me as being very opulent and very old world and over the top. And he's Vince McMahon. He's going to have something that's larger than life, right? So he says to you, "How attached are you to that mustache?" What did you say?
Well, he says, "Just tell me about your mustache." And I'm like, he said, "When did you grow it?" And I said, "I grew it as a freshman in college." And, I just really don't know what to say. And he looks at me, he says, "Well, I just want you to know, I really hate facial hair. I hate it." And I kind of looked at him and I said, well, you're saying, if something worked out and, everything worked out, would I shave it? Yeah, I'd shave it. We talked for about another hour. And all of a sudden he stops. He just looks at me, doesn't say a word, reaches into his top desk drawer, pulls out a razor, a can of shaving cream, and said, bathroom's right through that door. And I shaved it. Yeah, I shaved it right then and there when I walked out.
Was it a straight edge? Straight edge?
Yeah, it was. I mean, there was a lot of blood. It was just there wasn't a safety razor. I'd come back and I got a towel and a black. And Vince
but you know what I love about this, Ken, because it shows commitment. It shows heart. It shows you really wanted it. Like he wanted to know if you were playing or if you were serious.
Well, and that's what Vince said when I walked out. He looked at me and we talked about money and when I could be available and everything. And he just looked at me and he said, you just showed me something. I said, what's that? I'm an idiot. He said, no, you show me, you back up what you say. You'll start Saturday in Detroit. You should have seen the face on his secretary when I walked out about an hour and a half later and there was no
toilet
mustache.
paper all over your I mean, you are really funny about putting yourself out there too. I love that you take those risks, you take those chances. I got to know what it was like when Nick put you in the sleeper hold. Let's talk about that. Was that a for real thing? Because I remember that that those holds looked real.
Yes.
And was it real?
It is. The backstory was Nick Bockwinkel used a sleeper hold, and so did Vern Gagne, and of course they were enemies. And Nick and Bobby always claimed that the Gagne sleeper was illegal because it was really a chokehold, and Nick's was legal because it just cut off the supply to the carotid artery. And this backstory's been going for weeks. And I know Bobby Heenan came up with it. And Bobby says, you know what? Here, let me hold the mic a sec. Nick, why don't you show him? So Nick turns and just clamps the sleeper on me. And I can tell you it wasn't rehearsed, but.
All right, Ken. Now, I had promised the listeners that we would talk about some things that they might not know about you. And I think a lot of people may not know that you're pretty involved and have been throughout the years politically, behind the scenes. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it all began when I was with the AWA. As you know, being from Minnesota, our U.S. Senator then was a gentleman by the name of Rudy Boschwitz. Rudy was an over-the-top wrestling fan. I mean, big-time wrestling fan, where I think you knew Rick Nelson. Remember Tall Rick?
Yes, absolutely.
He was on Rudy's staff. So Rudy happened to call the wrestling office and wanted to see if they could get, it was a little bit different in those days. Politicians could do it. They wanted to get tickets because Rudy wanted to come to the matches. And, and he had been there a couple other times, so it was Rick that called. And, I said, great, hold on. And, how many people? And he said, well, they're going to be 5. And, I come back and I said, you're all set. I got 5 ringside. And he was like, really? Because they had come before and they just put him way up, in the crowd. This is like a United States Senator. And, so I come out, I'm sitting ringside. I go over and introduce myself. And that was the first time I ever met Rick. And I'm watching, Rudy, and I mean, he's like going crazy. The Baron is in the ring. And Rudy's giving the claw, jumping up and down. Really? And I swear, and I'm thinking, my God, this is a U.S. Senator? I get this call from Rudy's office, and he was head of the Republican Senatorial Committee. And they say, you've been invited to the White House Christmas ball. It's black tie. So I go to Washington and I get a tux. And here I am standing in the White House. Well, there's President Ronald Reagan and Nancy. There's George, the Vice President, George H.W. Bush. And he takes me up to the Vice President of the United States and introduces me. And then, he tells him who I am. And the Vice President all of a sudden says, oh, I love watching wrestling. He said, Barbara doesn't like it, but It's great. And he says, you ever met Paul Bosch from Houston? I was really a fan of his. And I'm thinking, this can't be
Oh my
real.
gosh. I think
And
there's
then,
a lot of us that people wouldn't expect to be wrestling fans that are. You know what I mean? I think we're all out here. That's so
and
funny.
here was the greatest line. He said, one of the reasons I love to watch it, and I'm going, I have no idea, sir. He says, because you always know who the good guy is and the bad guy. I wish the world was like that. And then, we're talking, and then even the vice president says, I gotta ask you, how much of that is real? And I'm thinking, okay, I'm standing in the White House, I'm talking to the vice president, and then he's, oh, wait a minute, Cap, come here. And he brings over and he introduces me to Casper Weinberger, the Secretary of Defense.
You got to tell
sitting there going,
what? He's a wrestling fan?
George W. Bush, but he calls Cap Weinberger over just to introduce me. And, I'm thinking, how am I going to answer this question? And in my mind, I'm trying to carry on this, and I'm going, I'm standing in the White House with the Vice President of the United States and the Secretary of Defense. So I say to the Vice President, Mr. Vice President, I think wrestling is a lot like politics in that all you see is not exactly what it really is.
You did?
He just laughed. And, in those days, again, no cell phones or anything. And, you couldn't bring cameras in. I mean, they
oh my
checked
God, that is the
everything coming
funniest
into the
story.
White House. So I say to him, there's a photographers walking around. And I'm going, I'm never going to get this opportunity again, right? I said, Mr. Vice President, could I get a photo with you? He said, absolutely. And he calls the photographer over and he said, you know what? Come on. We're going to go in the blue room and we'll take a picture in front of the tree. So here's the vice president takes me into the blue room of the White House. And I've got this great picture of just me and George Herbert Walker Bush, the vice president of the United States, in tuxedo, standing in front of the official White House Christmas tree. Got everybody else out of the way, just the two of us.
I love it.
I get an invite from George Pillsbury. I mean, the Pillsbury, head of Pillsbury.
Wow.
Lived on Lake Minnetonka. He's having a party and invites me. And, I go, oh, that's great. And he said, but listen, you're going to have to, let me give you the directions. You're going to have to come early and you're going to have to park here and then you'll be shuttled over. And, he said, you can't really, be careful what you bring because you're going to have to pass through a lot of security.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, George Pillsbury's wealthy, famous, publicly traded corporation, but really? And I said, really? And he says, well, Gerald Ford's coming, former President Ford. And,
Wow.
George had gotten to know me and was kind of a wrestling fan. So, I get there and, go through security and, a lot of people, I forget his first name, had a finger hut and the art galleries was there. And all these people recognize me from, wrestling. And
Wrestling.
They're coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And finally, former President Gerald Ford arrives. And boy, you want to talk about trying to want to crawl into a hole. George Pillsbury takes me over. He says, come on, I want to introduce you to Jerry. They went to school together. And he goes, Jerry, I want you to know more people want a picture with him than you. And that's how he introduced me to the former president. And then
what a life you've led.
Well, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I've now met like the vice president and the former president. And then in 1987, I get a call where they want me to come to be part of an all-star salute to President Reagan. And to raise money, they wanted to put a celebrity at every table, and how they considered me in that group is still beyond me. And then there'll be a lunch and photo op with the president noon Monday, and this dinner is Monday night. And I'll never forget it, because that Sunday night turned out to be the 7th game of the 1987 World Series. I had tickets, gone to game 6. I literally had to give up my tickets for game 7 because of the time difference.
Oh, you poor
There was
baby.
no way I could fly in Monday morning. I'm not going to pass up lunch with the President of the United States. So they have this big party Sunday night. And, here I am watching the World Series. Lynn Anderson, the country western singer, is there. Joan Rivers, Richard Anderson, that was Oscar Goldman on $6 Million Man, Dick Van Patten, Dan Haggerty, who played Grizzly Adams. And Dan was a big baseball fan. So we hit it off. We were trying to watch the game. And I'm looking around at all these people trying to figure out, and Sergeant Slaughter was there too. And we're trying to figure out, what the hell are we doing with this bunch? But the greatest story from that night, after the game, Dan and I are talking, and his wife was there, but we see an older gentleman kind of just sitting by himself, in one of the chairs. Nobody's really talking to him. So Dan and I just figure we'll go over and engage this guy. It just felt bad. He's just sitting there. We go over and introduce ourselves and talking, and, tell him I do wrestling. We're talking a little about that. And all of a sudden this guy says to me, and both of us, "Well, are you a boxing fan too?" I said, "Oh yeah, I love boxing." And he goes, "Did you ever see the movie Raging Bull?" And I said, "Sure." Starred Robert De Niro. I mean, he won a couple Oscars. I said, "Sure." It was a Jake LaMotta story. It was an incredible movie. And he goes, "Well, I'm Jake LaMotta." And it was the real Jake LaMotta. And nobody knew who he was. And then literally, he goes, "Well, I'm the real Jake LaMotta."
You have the best stories, I swear to God.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And all of a sudden I get a call that they would like to invite me to the radio address a week from Saturday in the Oval Office.
I didn't know this story.
Would, and they still do a weekly radio address.
Yeah, but you got to actually be in the Oval Office while it was being broadcast, while they were doing it?
And that turned out, instead of the weekly radio address, that's when the president and Mrs. Clinton did a national TV address. And they had some children of federal workers, young children, sitting in front of them. And it was national TV. All the networks carried it. Well, when the camera panned out, you see me and a few people standing behind them. And it was like people were good. I started getting messages, my answering machine was like, "Hey, Ken, I know this is a stupid question, but are you in the Oval Office now?" So
what was that like? I've got to know what that felt like, what that was like, that experience.
When you walk in, I mean, it's one of those things, when you think of all the history and all the people that have occupied that office, it just kind of takes your breath away. And then afterwards, got to, because of, the work I had done, I've got this great picture with just President Clinton, Mrs. Clinton, and me, just the three of us standing in front of the Resolute desk in the Oval Office.
We're coming to an end, but I like this because I don't think people get to see the side of Ken Resnick. I think a lot of times it's all wrestling. It's all sports related, right? So I hope you'll consider coming back and dishing with me again, because your stories are wonderful. They make me laugh.
Oh, I would love to, but I can't help, and we might run over. There's kind of one story about you and wrestling that you haven't brought up, and I don't think I would be doing your fans justice if you didn't tell that story.
Oh, Oh no, we'll do that another time. Oh yeah, we'll save that for the next episode. We're gonna need some material.
If that's the case, I've got only one thing to say.
What's that? Did Killer Ken Resnick just cluck like a chicken at me? I think he did. He did. Anyway, I love you dearly.
Hey, listen. Hey, I did the bird with Coco Beware on national TV, and I danced with Hillbilly Jim on TV, and I rapped on the Wrestle Rock Rumble video. So this was nothing.
Yeah, this was nothing. Oh, speaking of things that you've done, I know that you're co-hosting a podcast as well. Do you want to give it a little plug? Tell me about it.
Yep. Thank you. I'm doing it on Voc Nation, which is vocnation.com. It's available on all the podcast platforms. The host of the show is Bruce Wirt, who's known as a voice of choice. And also with me is Bill Apter, the legendary wrestling journalist. So we tell a lot of behind the scene stories for wrestling, and we get a lot of people that listen, and I think it drops weekly, I think on Wednesdays on Voc Nation. So thank you for allowing me that shameless plug. I want to make sure, because I'm sure they're going to watch. I figure you probably put it up. My two little nieces wearing my T-shirt that I am so blessed to, as we talked about off air, to have them in my life. And boy, I tell you what, when you get like just unconditional love from 7 and 8 year olds, it's amazing. One more shameless plug: if you were at all a wrestling fan and saw the T-shirts, you can get it at prowrestlingtees.com. Okay, 2 shameless plugs. I'm done.
All right. Well, thank you again for being with me. And until next time, my friend, stay safe.
You too. I love you.
I love you too.
Thank you for joining us on You Are Solid Gold. We hope that you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed bringing it to you. Would you please subscribe, like, and share this episode? If you know of a person, place, or thing that is a hidden gem that we should feature on Solid Gold with Michele Lau, please submit it for consideration at hello@youaresolidgold.com. Now, get out there and shine.